I am a certified sex coach, and my PhD is in human sexuality. And what I do most of the time is when okay, so there's a couple different things that I do. One is I have a private practice, and inside of that, I work with individuals and partnerships around sexual exploration and expression and freedom. So my clients come from all walks, and mostly they're just looking for something else, something new. A lot of them are exploring BDSM and kink for the first time, and very BDSM kinky friendly. I also work with people who are just getting to know their own bodies. And so, it's really mixed. The other things I do are what I lead SAR, which is Sexual Attitude Reassessment. And I very cheekily refer to it as having people watch porn for the greater good. But it's actually a lot more than that. So, for example, this last weekend, I was working with a group of university students who are mostly doctors, psychologists, therapists, and midwives who are in a program in sexology. And so we gathered them together and we did the SAR. And the purpose is for them to examine their own values, attitudes, and beliefs so that they can better serve their clients and their patients. So it's about broadening their awareness about human sexual behavior and their, noticing where their own boundaries are and the things that they're comfortable with, but also learning about all the different amazing ways people explore sexuality and pleasure together.
Oh my
And
goodness, it's incredible.
it's so much fun. But yeah, that's why it's very tricky of me to say, I make doctors watch porn for the greater good. That is what it is. And then I'm also the curriculum director at Sex Coach U, which is the premier training program for new sex coaches. So
Okay,
lots of things going on over
yeah,
here.
lots of
Sorry,
fun.
this is
I
a
love
bigger
it.
answer than you wanted.
No, that's perfect. We love big answers here. Yes. I want to go back to a few things. So, first and foremost, you said you have your PhD in human sexuality.
Mhm.
If you were to describe to someone, your average person, what exactly our human sexuality is and what aspects of our life it contains, how would you describe it?
How would I describe human sexuality?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love this question so much. So it's helpful to think of human sexual behavior. Okay, so sex isn't just the one thing, and you're right. People do like to condense it down into penetration, but that's just one thing that people might or might not do. If you think about the whole range of human sexual behavior and all the different ways that we can access pleasure on our own, with a partner, with multiple partners, in so many different ways. So it can be expressed. Let's start with physically. There are different ways we share touch. And we have these whole bodies. We are so much more than just our genitals, right? That we have all these body parts. We can play with our hair. We can share a gaze, the way we look at each other. There's also the mental and emotional realms, where you connect in these ways, the things that we say to one another, the words that we choose when we're talking to our beloved, the or even listening to erotica, someone reading poetry or a sexy story or singing, that can be a sensual sort of experience, right? And all of this could fall under the umbrella of sexual behavior. Um, I mean, I can go on, but really, I think about it as just anything that we do that helps us explore pleasure and shared bliss in our bodies and with our partners.
I love that. And yeah, I think first of all, the examples you gave were very beautiful. I've been told from members that one thing that they like about coming to Live Jasmine is that they're able to explore fantasies they have or kinks that they have that they feel really uncomfortable exploring with their spouse, or maybe they're single or they're afraid that they'll be rejected if they do share this with someone in their day-to-day life. And so
Mhm.
because they're able to just like explore with the model, then they're able to discover, oh, do I actually like this or do I not actually like this? And they're also, a lot of times, if they have a really positive experience, which it's almost guaranteed that they will, given the nature of the site, they then feel more confident to take it to their spouse or a partner. My
Mhm.
question for you would be, if someone isn't given that platform or that opportunity to explore themselves, like so many of us, I feel like don't explore ourselves at all. We still have a very narrow understanding. We are not even sure of what we like. We maybe figure it out from time to time if a partner does something like that.
Mhm.
What consequences do we face by not knowing ourselves intimately and sexually?
When we don't know our own bodies, our own desires, what arouses us, what excites us, we cut ourselves off, not necessarily intentionally, right? But we are cut off somehow from our own pleasure and access to bliss and access to sharing those experiences with a partner. Um, we, yeah, it just feels like a disconnect, to not know. That's why it's really important for people to do their own self-exploration, to tune into themselves first. We have to look inward before we can connect. Um, and there's an ebb and a flow to it. It's not like we have to have total mastery of ourselves before we can be with other people. No, that wouldn't make any sense. But to take times to get curious about ourselves as we also get curious about our partners, and also to share that and to explore together. Um, but yeah, I think the consequence really is just being cut off from opportunities for pleasure.
Yeah, I like how you said that. You've connected the word bliss with our sexuality now, I think two times. And I'd love to hear more about how you see that interrelation between our sexuality and our bliss or our pleasure.
Well, sex is one way to access it. If we think about the way we feel when we're doing that thing that we really love, for example, when I was in university, I used to be part of a ballroom dancing club. And there are few feelings that are as exquisite as a well executed foxtrot or quick step for me. When my partner and I were in total sync with one another and one of our favorite songs was on and we're whirling around the room in perfect harmony, that for me was experienced like bliss. I mean, it's just like in that moment, all was right in the world. I had nothing else to worry about. Final exams, whatever, that paper I was supposed to be writing, it'll still be there in my head, you know. But it's just those moments of bliss. And if we think about it in terms of our sexuality, that's another place where we can access that feeling of just like everything else just melts away. And I'm just here in the moment, sharing this feeling, this expression with my partner, with myself.
Sexuality can bring us into the present, but also it gives us that sense of a connection. And maybe that's why so many people feel stress relief from it.
Mm-hmm.
I know you said that you get people to watch porn for the greater good. But
Sorry.
I'm curious about what your thoughts are on camming versus porn.
Ooh, oh, that is an interesting question. I think, oh, yeah. Okay. So I often think about porn or erotic material, and there's so many different ways it can be delivered and so many different ways it can be called. There's actually not a really strict definition that's always true here, um, at least not legally. But it's a bit of a conversation. When you watch porn, one of the ways to interact with it, I mean, of course, there's just sort of watching it and getting turned on or not. But you can also ask yourself, okay, whose pleasure is this for? Or whose gaze is this for? Are these activities happening because a director said, okay, do this, I want to see this, and you do that, and in this position and whatever? Um, is it carefully curated for the end consumer, the person watching the porn? Is it the the actors in the porn? Are they acting for their own pleasure and it's just being recorded and distributed? We don't always know. Sometimes we know, but we don't always know. And the distinction I would see with camming, um, actually not having had a direct camming experience myself, but from what I know of it and what I understand is there is more of a direct connection between the model and the client. They have an interaction. They agree to what they're going to do. What is the topic of this session? What is exciting? What would you like me to wear? What do you want to see? What do you want to talk about? What are you bringing? And so it's more personal because there is that interaction and that communication. The models that are spending this longer amount of time have engaged with their client. They've made it possible for that to happen. If the client gets bored or isn't getting what they want, they will leave, right? So there has to be something keeping them there. And if it's not nudity or sexual explicitness, then it must be something in the connection that's happening. They started talking about something that was mutually interesting, or maybe the client finally had someone to talk to about whatever is going on for them on that day. Because how often does it happen? I mean, even in our friendships, we connect with a buddy and we have a really long chat over coffee or something, right? Usually it's because somehow we've opened up and we were able to get deep into something. And maybe our friend was supporting us and listening to all the things that were going on, or that one thing that's just like, wow, I have to get this off my chest, or I need to kind of explore this in conversation. It could be that that need is being met inside of these conversations. But I think it does circle back to what you were saying about connection.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I myself and am so much I'm very curious about. Because when you have like camming, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry, but the girls making the most money are usually not actually being explicit, that makes me wonder more like, do we have a very lonely population and are they really seeking to fill that need? Um, because of course there is the potential for intimacy. And so, is this a way that they're filling that gap? And are we lonely right now? Are people lonelier or less lonely than ever? Would you say we're more lonely or less lonely than we were 50 years ago?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think either of us were alive 50 years ago, so we're going to have to be guessing. But okay, if I think like a historian and thinking about the ways our societies have evolved, our towns, our cities have grown, I think we do have greater distance between us. I think families used to live together in larger groups. So there was more opportunity for connection. We used to live closer to each other. If I think about my parents' families, um, yeah, there was more contact. Even as a child, I had more contact with my family. Of course, I've moved halfway around the world now, which wasn't wasn't planned, but it's just the way life went, right? But I think there must be some elements of the way life in modern society has evolved that I think it would lead towards more loneliness, but it's not an area that I've studied directly, but casually I would say, oh yeah, and there's good things about it. Um, sometimes families don't get along very well together. So maybe it's nice to have that option. But I think it's just different.
What's one of the most interesting pieces of research that you've seen or maybe found yourself, or just something that stands out to you as really interesting?
There's an article that was written several years ago that was about the experience of pain in ritual. And they were looking at a number of different, I can find the citation for you if you'd like, but they were looking at people doing various kinds of ritual ceremonies and seeing if there were any parallels in BDSM practices to see, is this part of what motivates people towards sadomasochistic behaviors? And it was really fascinating to see these things kind of being connected. They were looking at shamanic traditions or self-flagellation and like Roman Catholic kind of old school traditions, and looking to see what that kind of stimulation does to the body and why people enjoy it. And then looking at, I think they honed in on piercing and cutting kind of rituals in a BDSM context. It's fascinating. They were noticing that there were parallels, and they talked about the various hormones and chemicals that the body releases when you have this kind of stimulation, but also the ritual nature of it was very small, the study that they did. So the participants that they had were very, very ritualistic about what they were doing. There was a pattern, there was a almost not like a schedule of events, but there was a way, there was a ritual to it. There was a lot of intention that was brought into the practice, and they knew why they were doing this. They knew to what kind of connecting purpose. And okay, it's been a minute since I've read this one, but if you ask me one of my favorites, this is going to be it, because it was just incredibly validating to read, like, yes, people who engage in this behavior are not deviant necessarily. There are grounds for it. And I think the reason this one sticks in my head is because, like I said, it's been a minute since I've read it. I read it many, many moons ago when I was still a sexology student. And so it was one of those first things I read. I was like, yeah, not weird. Like, this is totally normal to be doing this. This even has a long tradition in human behavior in different contexts.
I
I'm not
love
doing it the same way, but
Yeah, I like that a lot because, to me, what it kind of communicates is that we are still very like instinctual creatures as human beings. And most of the time, our actions are rooted somewhere. I'm curious from your perspective, why are we so sensitive about sexuality in our culture to the point where I think we shun it, we certainly shame it, we try and hide it, but we also, it's very clear we're obsessed with it. You know what I mean? It's in all of our movies, it's all over social media. What is this weird tug and pull of not wanting it but being obsessed with it secretly?
that's that's an excellent question. I think you pointed to a couple of things, a couple of components, the biggest one of which will be shame.
Mhm.
Um, Sexuality has been used to shame so many people, has been used to control in the sense of maintaining a social order historically, right? You could marry these people. Sex could only happen in the context of marriage. If you want to get really ancient about it, it becomes about being able to trace the paternity of children for the purposes of inheritance. This is a lot of the reason why priests can't marry, because they didn't want the children. The church had so much wealth to protect. I mean, before I go down that whole rabbit hole, but
No,
this
that's
is a lot of it,
fascinating. Those are
right?
all really fascinating facts.
Okay. Well, look, because if priests had children and the church had all the money, if the whatever land that guy owned in that time would be up for inheritance by his children.
Mhm.
right? But what if they weren't also part of the, maybe they didn't want to also be pastors or something, I don't know. But so there is historically systems in place that are directly connected to sexuality that are designed to preserve the social order, the governmental structures, the religious orders, the whatever it is. You know, there's so many different ways. It's pretty much everywhere. But I think the tension comes in because it is such a core piece of our humanity.
Yeah, it
Our
is.
sexuality sits at our center, right? It's how we connect with ourselves, it's how we connect with our beloved or whoever our partner is, however we choose to express that. We talked earlier about bliss, and bliss is like that suspension of all the other stuff and just being in the now, right now. Some people will express this in a very spiritual way, like it's a connection to the greater collective spirit
The
or
divine.
the divine, yeah, however they want, whatever language they choose to use for that. But that whole idea of being connected to something that's bigger than our own individual self. So I think there's that tension because it is so intimate and personal to each of us. And yet it's also somehow a great big concern for the social systems and structures that we've developed over time. It is powerful to be sexually realized, to be in connection with your own sexuality, with your identity, with to have that access to bliss on your own terms.
Yeah.
It's a little bit radical to say that out loud, even.
What are some steps that people can take to get to know themselves and explore themselves sexually?
I love this. I would start with yourself, you know, just getting really curious about your senses. You know, we could start there, you know, engaging your five senses, you know, what feels good to me? What kind of touches do I like? Does it feel good when I touch my hand this way, or if I scratch it, or if I squeeze it, or, you know, what are different ways that that feels good? Or maybe I like the fabric of my shirt, or, you know, I'm in Germany, it's cold. I have a blanket on my lap. You know, maybe I like that warm cuddliness. Um, you know, what appeals to me visually? What do I like to see? What are different ways I connect with beauty? Is it in nature? Is it a specific kind of nature? You know, am I into the mountains or the seas? One of those classic questions. What what do I like about seeing in my partner? And actually, that would be our next step, you know, getting curious about what do I like just for me, and then what do I find appealing about my partner? Do I like their smell? Do I like the feeling of their whiskers on my cheek when they kiss me in the morning? Do I like, you know, and engaging each sense. Sometimes one of the exercises I'll give my clients is to pick one sense for a day and just explore the world through that. Just spend a day attending to what you hear and noticing, oh, I like this sound, or that not so much, or wow, all I want is silence. And what do I hear in the silence? Is silence even achievable? Um, so when we start engaging just at that really basic primal sensory level, that already starts opening things up. And then, of course, there's exploring our body physically, and noticing, okay, what is my arousal like? Where do I want to be touched if I want to get sexually excited? Do I like being touched here or touched there? Do I want to go straight to my genitals, or do I want to explore the back of my thighs first? I don't know. And start playing with what other things are exciting. You know, do I find certain clothes exciting? Do I want certain smells, but definitely not those smells? You know, maybe there's already a response to our partner's perfume. Or in one really bizarre episode from my youth, one of my boyfriends showed up. He was a new one. I was so excited about dating this guy. I just was smitten. And he showed up for one of our dates and kept trying to get close to me. And I couldn't. And I couldn't figure out why. And I was like, what is wrong with me? Like nothing was firing. And it's later on, we're sitting on the couch. He's taken off his jacket and I snuggle in, and then it hits me. This guy smells exactly like my dad.
Yeah.
He was wearing the same cologne that my dad had worn when I was a child. And I didn't recognize it immediately. But as soon as I got in there and got like a chestful kind of a whiff, I was like, yeah, like he immediately hit the shower and then things were fine. So, we start with ourselves and then we get curious about our partner. Hopefully, our partner gets curious about us. We can start doing cool things like mapping and just playing with it.
What's mapping?
Mapping. So, like noticing, okay, I like to be touched here. This is really nice when you touch this part of my neck, but I don't like it if you do it with your mouth because that tickles. And then I'm going to go like, right? But with your hands, it's nice.
Yeah.
So, you like making a map of the body in that way.
It sounds like getting really present, essentially. And because when you go into the senses, whether it's touch or taste or sound, you have to get very present in order to experience those senses, And so it sounds like getting very present with yourself and what you like and what you don't like, and really, yeah, soaking up life is a great place to start.
I would only add also giving yourself the grace and permission to like and not like anything.
Yeah.
There's no right way, there's your way. And it might change. One day you like this, and the next day, meh, not so much, but that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, just sort of getting all of that, noticing your themes. But yeah, I think this is where you pointed to this earlier, actually, when you were talking about the clients of the cam models, um, feeling shy about sharing a desire with a partner. This is where we get shut down, is we realize, oh, I like this thing. But what if someone finds out they like this thing?
Yep.
You know, so many of my clients talk to me about exactly this, like, is it okay that I am interested in wearing full body latex? And I say, yes, of course. Do you like it? Do you have an allergy to it? Do you, what's going on? And so that's where we start to explore, you know, what do they have attached to that? But, when we allow ourselves to explore the world, to get present, to explore our own desire, to explore our own arousal, and just be okay with whatever it is, then so much opens. So long as everyone involved consents enthusiastically, it's co-created shared pleasure, then yes, game on. And if someone over there is doing something that you don't like, it's okay. They're over there. You're
Yeah.
not having that sex. Let them do, so long as they're happy and they're all agreeing to it, why am I worried?
Very beautiful. This has been a great interview. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's been so much fun to talk with you. And